community. One of my favorite things to do in college was to play board games. To play any kind of party game where I was able to get together with people and to kind of do these like role-playing like games. And one of the favorite games that we played was either Mafia. Have you ever heard of that game before? Anybody? Just me? Oh, there we go. We got some. Have you heard of Werewolf? Okay, some people. So the premise of the game is everybody gets a different role in the game. Some of the people are the bad guys, like the werewolves, or the hitmen and mafia. And some people are not able to do anything. They're the villagers. They're the people who are just waiting to figure out if they'll survive. And then lastly, there are people who have special roles where they're able to try to figure out if this person is the bad guy or not. The premise of all these games is each round or each night, there's a voting phase after the action happens. One person is eliminated each round, and then the morning comes, and the whole group has to decide, were you the bad guy or not? If you vote them off and you get it right, all the villagers, all the good people win. If you get it wrong, the bad guy stays in, they get another night to eliminate another one. So, it's similar. Today's game is kind of like Among Us, the digital version of this. You pretend to do a bunch of jobs around. One person goes around eliminating everybody. Person presses a button. Everybody votes to see if they get the imposter. All of this to say, these games are great for building community because what you're trying to do is you're trying to blend in. I have always been fascinated by these games, but highly intimidated by them. Because when you start the game, you wonder, am I actually going to be able to either trick everybody, or am I going to be able to blend in just enough to actually prove my innocence? It doesn't take much to see that this is very much like life. Anybody remember the start of their first job? Will the people here like me? Will I be able to do this job well? In your families, when you get together for big family gatherings, are the people that I don't see for a long period of time, will they like me? Will I get into an argument? How do I get along with everybody? With your friends, new friends, when you meet friends for the first time, how do you get along with them? Will this be a long friendship? Will it be a short friendship? How do you maintain that friendship when it comes to hobbies? Will I like this for a long period of time? Am I going to invest a lot of money in it for nothing? Whatever entertains you, is it for a long period of time or a short period of time? If you're sitting through, let's say, a Netflix series, you binge 8 hours and then you're done, was it satisfying? In your religious worship, in all of this, we're trying to figure out, what are we doing and how do we do it well? And making decisions becomes incredibly difficult. And it's really easy to get into that mode of autopilot where we're trying just to stay neutral. But the fact is, you can't remain neutral. You must make a decision in whatever you do, be it a game or real life. And in doing so, you must choose why you do what you do. And this is where it gets messy, friends, doesn't it? Be it in your job, in your families, with your friends, be it as you grow in your faith, and wherever you are, things get messy. As we look at the stories of 2 Samuel, we'll also see the beauty and the ugliness of humanity on full display. I honestly love the stories of how human each of these characters feel. It's really easy to glance over the reading, but when you dig down and you try to see the emotions and the tragedies and the triumphs that happen with each character, it becomes powerful. They point us back to the God who is the ultimate hero, because when you see the brokenness of the people, it hurts, because we find ourselves in their shoes a lot of the time too. While we may see bad examples throughout the stories, with David being no exception, we also get to see why David is called a man after God's own heart, when he returns to God and submits to him. God is always calling us back to himself, but the question is boiled down to, who are you wanting to and willing to Who are you wanting to and willing to serve? This, again, begs the question, why do you do what you do? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for a particular cause? Are you doing it for someone else or something else? Those temporary moments of trying to serve something else always boil back to yourself. Are you serving yourself, or are you serving a lasting king? So the big idea I'm going to purport today is we're going to focus on just Jesus, more of him and less of everything else. And this is all in light of the big picture throughout this entire series in 2 Samuel of being both broken and beloved. As imperfect as we may be, our perfect Savior invites us to come to him broken but made whole in him. So how do we get here? Before we start 2 Samuel 3. There's this mode towards the ascension to the throne. David is anointed as a young man, probably around, let's say, 12 to 15 years old. In 1 Samuel 16, it throws him completely off his groove. He was a nothing. He was the runt of the litter. Nobody considered him particularly important. He was the youngest son. David is anointed to be this king. He doesn't immediately become the king, but he's anointed to become the king. He's chosen. He remains a shepherd for some time, but then he's thrown into battle, fights a giant, continues to fight these great wars. He is heroed. He is praised by the people. People sing songs about them. They love him. And then he's betrayed by the one that he serves as king, the one that he idolizes and perhaps looks up to. He remains loyal to him even though he is betrayed by him, even though a hit is put on him. He becomes public enemy number one by the one he is serving. And he's on the run for 15 years throughout the rest of 1 Samuel. David is called a man after God's own heart in the midst of this, even though he makes all these sorts of mistakes, even though he has 15 years of on the run, wondering, how am I going to get from point A to B? And then another year and a half of remaining radio silent with God. God calls him back to himself, and we see that David appeals before God. And it drastically changes the trajectory of his life again. God leads him in a unique way. What it means to be a man after God's own heart, it means even though we're not perfect, we know who to turn back to. David, again, he's easily angered. He's manipulative. He's lustful. Man, he has so many wives. And he trains his son, essentially, who has seen his example, to have close to 1,000 wives in the next reign. He is stubborn, and he is a neglectful father. Throughout 2 Samuel, you'll see he's great at being a politician, but he never disciplines his children. He loves them to bits, but never disciplines them. David's example is intriguing. Again, we see a broken character, but a beloved character. Saul dies, and David ascends the throne in the first 2 chapters of 2 Samuel. And war breaks out between the houses of Saul and the houses of David. In the midst of this, we see the idea of calling. Calling is where we practice life in whatever capacity that most fulfills us. It is a blessing to others. It is whatever fulfills us, and it is whatever glorifies God. David is most fulfilled when he is in this light. When he deviates from this, tragedy happens. So the question to you is, how do you start to follow your calling? I would argue you have to identify who you are serving. Is it yourself? Or are you serving a lasting king? Great theologian Bob Dylan once wrote, you have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, or it may be the Lord. But you're going to have to serve somebody. And he writes all these other things in his song. He says, you're going to serve things like power and gambling and strength and beauty and entertainment, drugs, success in your job, titles and prestige, justice or service, being famous, being wealthy or poor, disabled or a victim, displaced, security, comfort, or whatever you own, spirituality, religiosity, or possession in life. In whatever capacity, it is easy to pick something other than what is lasting because it is immediately in front of you. The big question you have to keep asking is, what do you choose to serve? What are you submitting to? And we see David has submitted to the Lord. This is huge. When you see this idea of versus stronger and stronger versus weaker and weaker, pay attention to why it is. Verse 1, that was the beginning of a long war between those who were loyal to Saul and those who were loyal to David. As time passed, David became stronger and stronger. Why? Because he trusted in the Lord. While Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. Why? Because he and his family trusted in themselves and their own glory. We see that as we trust in the Lord, things become weaker and weaker in our life. Their influence fades, but you become stronger and stronger in what is lasting. The premise of what it means to be a Christian, friends, falls entirely on this point. What is growing stronger and stronger in your life versus what is weaker and weaker? Who and what do you serve? You have to ask yourself that. I'm harping on this because this is the absolute first step that you will take to become a Christian or to call yourself a faithful follower of Christ. What and whom do you serve? Are you trying to maintain dual leadership in your life, where you have Jesus and something else? When you acknowledge who and what you serve, you must give yourself completely to it. If you have vying affections, you're going to hate one and love the other. And it's never something that's going to work. Anything else will cause confusion and betrayal. This is why baptism becomes so important. Whatever phase you are in your faith, baptism is a symbolism of you giving up your old life, dying to the old way, submitting to Jesus, saying, I'm not going to do my faith alone. I give it to you, Jesus. I'm accountable before everybody who witnesses it. Baptism is the symbol to show that you're going from an old way to a new way. And David is doing just that. David is going from his old way to a new way. It doesn't mean he becomes perfect. It means that he is progressing to becoming more and more like God, the one that he is following. So we see political success, military success for David. In verses 2 through 5, we see another kind of growing legacy. There are sons who were born to David in Hebron. And what's interesting about this is 7 years worth of time. The first 5 years, David was the only king. The last 2 years, Ishbosheth rises up as king as he's installed by Abner, and that is when the war happens. David was the only king, and then rival king comes. And in this meantime, a legacy is building. And not just with one wife, with 6 wives, with individual sons. Do you see a problem so far? Not just the polygamy side. Do you see the other problem? Successors. Who gets to take the throne? The oldest son was Amnon, whose mother was Ahinoam from Jezreel. Amnon was not a good guy. This chapter that comes out later, he rapes his half-sister. It's no good. He makes himself disqualified and later is murdered by one of his other brothers. The second son, Daniel, Kileab, he's also called. We hear nothing from him. 2 different names are used here, likely. Some commentators say Kileab died early, and Daniel was the next son. But we hear nothing from him. This comes from the mother who is Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. The third was Absalom. Absalom is the one whose sister was violated. He creates a vendetta, kills Amnon, and later on tries to kill his own father. It's already a messy family, isn't it? And what makes this particular son so unique is this comes from a political marriage from the king of Geshur. David is creating a political stronghold for himself where he is marrying from different nations to build strong relationships. Smart king, probably not the wisest for a husband, though. The fourth was Adonijah. Later on, at the end of David's life, Adonijah says, well, I'm going to become king. And, I'm not going to care what my father says. I'm going to rally people around me. And what's specifically listed there is that Adonijah was never disciplined. It's already messy with these first 4. And then, with the last 2, we know nothing about them. Don't know what happens to them. But we know at least David's family is messy. Even though he's successful, it's messy. The fifth was Shephatiah, whose mother was Abital. And the sixth was Ithream, whose mother was Eglah, David's wife. These were the sons born to David in Hebron. And these are not the only sons. These are not even the only wives. He's going to get a seventh wife by the end of this chapter. And well later on, he's going to have multiple other wives. One that he gets through very, very difficult circumstances. But all of this boils to, while there is success, you have to question, how did you get that success in the first place? 2 Samuel 3, 6 through 11, we see a flash to where Abner, who is the commander of Saul's army, who is now installing Ishbosheth as king. He is extremely successful in building influence among 10 different tribes of Israel. He has united Israel around him, and then pointing to Ishbosheth. During this war between the house of Saul and the house of David, as it went on, Abner became a powerful leader. Some translations will say he strengthened himself. Even though the house of Saul was failing, he was growing stronger. Among those loyal to Saul, he was strong amongst them. One day, Ishbosheth, a man of shame, that's what his name literally means. Good job, parents, for naming your son that. Saul's son, he accused Abner of sleeping with one of his father's concubines, a woman named Rizpah, daughter of Ai. Now, even though Saul was dead, that does not mean that his former wives were available for remarriage. Once you become a king's wife, you remain a king's wife to the end of their day. They're cared for and richly cared for, but if you violate the king's wife, it's a big problem. The accusation that's made by Ishbosheth is essentially saying, you're a traitor, you need to die. Abner was furious, though. He said, am I some Judean dog to be kicked around like this? He says also in another translation, am I a head of a dog? Dogs in this time were vile, they were annoying, they were just, they weren't pets, they were vicious. So to be called that, or to even claim that he's something like a head of a dog, or like a leader of just a bunch of dogs, he's saying, are you calling me worthless? Why are you calling me to this sin? He's saying, after all I have done for you, and for your father Saul and his family and friends, by not handing you over to David, is this my reward, that you find fault with me about this woman? Which can either be, he's accepting the accusation and saying, listen here, punk, I'm in charge. Don't you dare confront me about this. Or he's saying, why would you even think that I would do this? Because I am loyal. The text is not clear, and it does not make it very strong which is right. But in either case, Abner's not accepting this accusation. And he's saying, kind of like that, fine, what's going to happen is I'm going to invoke this curse on myself, saying, God, strike me and even kill me if I don't do everything I can to help David get what the Lord has promised him. Does that ring any kind of bells for you there? What the Lord has promised him. Abner knew that David was supposed to be king. And yet, he decided to install himself and Ishbosheth as king instead. But now he's turning back. He knows the truth, and he's going back to what he knows is the right thing. He's saying, I'm going to take Saul's kingdom and give it to David. I will establish the throne of David over Saul, as well as Judah, all the way from Dan to the north and Beersheba in the south. Ishbosheth didn't dare say another word because he was afraid of what Abner might do. The contrast is very stark between these two characters. Ishbosheth is the type who is idle. He does nothing. He might confront the wrong, but he's not going to do anything about it. It's this wishy-washy kind of person who just accepts things as they are, remains an autopilot, enjoys the good times, doesn't really revel in the bad times, just accepts things and tries to remain neutral. It doesn't work. And then you compare that to Abner. He's Mr. Man of Action. I kind of thought of Abner kind of like the example of Donald Trump. He is Mr. Fix-It. He is the one who gets things done. He has all the influence. He's able to make things happen, and in a very quick fashion. It's remarkable what he does. He goes from having everybody united to the house of Saul, and we'll see in the next handful of verses that he switches the allegiance to David, all because of his influence. We see a man of action and a man of inaction. So Abner, he said, did I finish those verses? Yep. Abner starts sending messages. Abner sends messages to David saying, doesn't the entire land belong to you? In the Hebrew, it literally is more ambiguous. It says, who actually owns the entire land? Who owns it? Which is an implication of saying, I'm actually the one in charge, but I want to give this to you as a gift. He says, make a solemn pact with me, and I will help turn over all of Israel to you. David replies, all right, but I'm not going to negotiate with you unless you bring back my wife, Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come. How many of you think that he misses his loved one? Sweet Michal, who saved him from an assassination attempt, led him outside of her window, and then quickly turned around and said, he was trying to kill me. I had to let him go. How many of you think that he misses his loved one? Michal was quickly given to another man named Palti, and she is in her second marriage, but the first marriage was never annulled. This is a political and legal game where David is wanting his former wife back, and then he would have influence over Saul's family. Legitimate right. It's not that David is wrong in asking for this, but there is a lack of love here. And we'll see that this man, Palti, has a whole different kind of affection. David then sends messages to Ishbosheth. He wants to get this job done. He says, give me back my wife, Michal, for I bought her with the lives of 100 Philistines. So Ishbosheth took Michal away from her husband, Palti, son of Laish. Palti followed along behind her as far as Bahurim, weeping as he went. And Abner told him, go back home. And then Palti returned. He followed his wife as far as he could until he was forcefully removed from her. It's a tragic little scene, but we see that there's lots of tragedies that build in a very real story. The political game continues. The message that is number 3 comes from Abner as he consults the elders of Israel. Some translations will include military officers as well. This is likely right outside of Ishbosheth's throne area, where all of the elders would have served as advisors. All of the military leaders would have served as advisors. And Abner would have gathered these men and said, listen here. For some time now, you have wanted to make David your king. Now's the time. For the Lord has said, I have chosen David to save my people Israel from the hands of the Philistines and from all of their enemies. It's fascinating. No particular prophecy is listed like this, but Abner is redirecting the command that was given to Saul, who was supposed to be the Messiah king, the Savior king who would save Israel from their enemies, and giving those words specifically to David and saying, this is your Messiah king, focus on him. And it's very, very effective. The elders listen. The military officers listen. They already had that inkling, but they weren't willing to commit. Now they're willing to commit. Messages 4 and 5, Abner also speaks to the men of Benjamin. This is a particular people that he had to speak privately to. This would have been the tribe of people who would have had the most amount of hostility towards David, because this was Saul's tribe. He speaks specifically to them, and whatever he says leaves a lasting impact on the Benjaminites, so much so that when in 1 Kings, the tribes all split again away from Judah, Benjamin remains. whatever was said there leaves a lasting impact. Then, in the last message, Abner went specifically to Hebron, the capital where David was, telling David that all the people of Israel and Benjamin had agreed to support him. It's brilliant news. All of these are meetings before the meetings in this final public declaration, where you see this big feast. Abner is public enemy number one, would have seen him. David entertained them with a great feast. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go and call an assembly of all Israel to support my lord the king. They will make a covenant with you to make you their king, and you will rule over everything your heart desires." So David sent Abner safely on his way. This word safely is used, I'd say, like 3.5 times within a very short period of time. Anytime a word is repeated inside of Scripture, very quickly, it's something to pay attention to. This word is shalom. It is typically welfare or peace, but it is a sense of wholeness. It is a reunification. This is a place of reconciliation between David and a former enemy. These two are coming together. There is a space of shalom. And he is sent away in peace as well, not with potential hostility. This is not a ceasefire like we see in Israel and Gaza right now. There is no ceasefire. It is done. This is peace. Absolute peace between David and Abner. They're best friends now. But not for long. Because Joab returns, and I kind of picture this like dun, dun, dun kind of noise. And the language that's used right here is very powerful because it's the suddenly kind of language where you're like, oh my goodness, what? It's that soap opera language when something, is great, but then you see like somebody is there who's not supposed to be there. This is Joab, but in real life. After Abner is sent away in safety in Shalom, Joab and some of David's troops returned from a raid, bringing much plunder with him. Joab returns as a man of violence who has destroyed people and has come back through a conquest. He is a man of vengeance. He is a man of action, just like Abner was. Abner was seeking reconciliation. Joab was still on a vengeance path. Joab was in a high position of power as well as David's commander. Also as David's, I believe, nephew as well. I mean, these are people related very closely. But Joab arrives, and then he's told that Abner he had just been there visiting the king, and he had been sent away in safety in Shalom. Joab rushes to the king, and he looks at the king. I imagine him pointing at the king and saying, "What have you done? Are you serious? Are you serious? What have you done? What do you mean by letting Abner get away? Are you serious? You know perfectly well that he came to spy on you and find out everything you're doing." He's calling David a fool. He's calling David an idiot because he just doesn't get it. And, we see different possible motives for what Joab's doing here. We see the truth that comes between David and Abner. But Joab has motives. Joab, from the get-go, it seems like he's caring about the king's well-being. And we might assume that from verse 25, but quickly right after that, we see that Joab goes on a personal mission. He's performing hypocritical justice where he has to betray the king or deceive the king, just as he is claiming Abner is doing, in order to get his own justice. Joab then left David and sent messengers to catch up with Abner, asking him to return. They found him at the well of Sirah and brought him back. This is probably about 2 miles away from Hebron. Stopping in a very, it would have been a long journey back home, stopping for a little bit of refreshment. These messengers catch up to him, and they give him such a convincing message to return, probably saying, the king has one more thing to say to you. and convinces him to come back. Abner arrives at Hebron. Joab took him aside, and this would have been right at the gateway of the city. He says, come here, I got to just talk to you real quick. Just real quick, I understand we were former enemies. I know you killed my brother, but hey, bygones are bygones. Pulls him to the side, says, come here. Stabs him in the stomach. Same way his brother died. Killed him in revenge for killing his brother. This is motive number 2. What's ironic about the killing of this place is that Hebron is a city of refuge where either murderers go to be judged or people who accidentally or incidentally kill somebody else. This is a city of safety. This is a place where at the gateway, the elders are supposed to judge whether there was wrong actually done. And we see from the context in the last chapter, Abner gave Asahel a chance. He told him to get away. Stop chasing me. Stop trying to kill me. Back off. Get away from me. I don't want to ruin these relationships. He ignores it, and Asahel dies. Is he at fault? That would have been decided at this gateway. But Joab takes justice into his own hands. It's not a pretty scene. Joab will get what is coming to him quickly as well down the road when he tries to find his own sense of justice and tries to hang on to the throne of God or the altar of God where he thought he would be safe. No killing could be done there. And he's ripped away from his safety, just as he ripped away Abner from his safety. There's a lot of hypocrisy that happens between Joab to Abner. And when David hears about it, he declares, I vow by the Lord that I and my kingdom are forever innocent of this crime against Abner, son of Ner. Joab and his family are the guilty ones. May the family of Joab be cursed in every generation. Wow. With a man who has open sores or leprosy, or who walks on crutches, or dies by the sword, or begs for food. It's the trifecta of horror during this time. Physical illness, war, or famine. Scary. And he's saying that to his own family. But it's recognizing the gravity of his sin. He's putting drastic distance away from this because David did not order this. So Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because Abner had killed his brother Asahel at the Battle of Gibeon. I think that David would hold these words to heart that Paul writes in Ephesians 5:11. Take no part in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness. Instead, expose them. Don't let them remain in hiding. Expose them. Distance yourself from them. Have nothing to do with them. Stay on the right path. And then there's a sense of humiliation. I heard this story some time ago. There was I believe a police sergeant or a school superintendent, I forget which one. He was so tired of all of the crime and all of the problems that are happening with these kids, so he would make these kids wear these signs and walk to and from school wearing this, saying that this little bit of shame would teach them to wake up and see that they can't keep doing this. I think David does something pretty similar here. He looks at Joab and all those who were involved in this, and he says, tear your clothes. That's already a pretty intense thing. Not many people had many pairs of clothes. He says, tear what is valuable to you. Put on burlap. Put on this itchy, scratchy stuff. Mourn for the one that you just killed. You're going to be at the front of the line. And David himself walked behind the procession to the grave. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king and all the people wept at his graveside. Then the king sang this funeral song for Abner. Should Abner have died as fools die? Your hands were not bound. No. Your feet were not chained. No, you were murdered, a victim of a wicked plot. David has this very unique, gentle, and affectionate way of engaging with people. He's mourning for his former enemy becoming a new friend. He's acknowledging the position of Abner, as well as the injustice that was done to him, while highlighting who the real enemy was. We see this honorable and gentle example coming from David. All the people wept again for Abner. David had refused to eat anything on the day of the funeral, and now everyone begged him to eat, but because it was customary to have this meal right after the funeral, just as we do today. David continues to say, and he makes a vow, even similar to what Abner does at the beginning, when he vows to Ishbosheth that I will give this kingdom to David. Ironically, he still gives it to David. And in this moment, David says, may God strike me and even kill me if I eat anything before sundown, because he remains in mourning. This pleased the people very much. In fact, everything the king did pleased them. So everyone in Judah and all Israel understood that David was not responsible for Abner's murder. Then King David said to his officials, don't you realize that a great commander has fallen today in Israel? And even though I am the anointed king, these two sons of Zeruiah, Joab and Abishai, are too strong for me to control. So may the Lord repay these evil men for their evil deeds. Some translations right at the end will say that David was weak in this moment, or David was gentle in this moment. David takes a gentle response as a gentle king, honors the dead, but understands that even though these men, Joab and Abishai, have radical influence and they are very successful in their military careers, even though he cannot himself do anything about it in that moment, he leaves it to God's hands to judge in the future. We see a lot of different examples of faithfulness between these four men that pop up. Ishbosheth is weak and unwilling to act, easily manipulated and capitulates to everything. This is the kind of faith in our day where you're unwilling to do anything, unwilling to commit to anything, saying, whatever may come, let it be. It is what it is. Everything is going to be fine so long as I am fine. Unwilling to commit. It doesn't lead him anywhere good because he's thrown along with the waves of the sea. Abner is Mr. Man of Action. He gets the job done, but on his terms and for his sake. Disregards the truth unless it's convenient. There's an old form of heresy for Christianity called Pelagianism. You want to say Pelagianism with me? It's just a fun word to say. Pelagianism. It just makes you sound sophisticated, but really what it is I'm going to figure out my faith my way, and I'm going to earn my faith. Some people would even get to the point of saying, I will buy my salvation through my works. This is Abner. I'm going to gather everybody, and I'm going to make you king, and I'm going to unite the land. It's all on me. I'm Mr. Fix-It. I'm going to do this for God. That doesn't work either, does it? Joab protects his position passionately. He acts deceitfully to retain his position. That's his third motive. If Abner would have successfully followed through with developing this covenant between him and David, as well as Israel and David, he likely would have become the next commander. What happens for Joab? You're second best commander now. He wants to retain his position. He acts deceitfully to do so. He knows the truth. He knows what's right, and he acts in the name of truth. This is the idea of the carnal believer or the carnal Christian, where you say, I know the truth, but I still want to do this. I know the truth. I know what Jesus wants me to do, but I still like this part of my life. I can't give this up. Joab couldn't give up his position. Joab could not give up his revenge. Joab could not give up his influence. Do you resonate with any of these three? I do. Temptation is wild. Sometimes I can feel like Joab very easily, where when I lose control of a situation, I just think, why? When my kids go wayward and want to do whatever they want to do, I think, why? When the house gets messy beyond messy, why? When somebody loved in my life dies, I think, why? Just when I see things fall apart, I just want to say, why, God? Why does it have to be this way? Why did things have to go wrong? And if I'm not redirecting my focus to how David leads as a surrendered follower who is gentle in seeking the shalom of the Lord, who appeals to God for judgment and turns to God in crisis and in life, if I'm not doing that as a surrendered follower, it is easy to follow the path of Joab, where you mix truth with yourself. You are your own standard. Again, you can easily fit into any of these categories, but the goal is to point to where David's example is as a man after God's own heart, to being gentle, to seeking the shalom, the wholeness that comes from God. Is it easy to do that? No. This is why I like 2 Samuel 7. This is such a key passage inside of all of 2 Samuel. David wants to build a palace or a temple for the Lord to live in. And originally he's told, yeah, go do it. But then the prophet comes back and says, no, I have a different plan. So David, after being told no, after being given these unique promises from the Lord, he goes in, he sits down before the Lord and prays and says, who am I? O sovereign Lord, he acknowledges his worthlessness in the moment, but the one who is truly worthy, the Lord. And he says, what is my family that you have brought me this far? And now, sovereign Lord, in addition to everything else, you speak of giving your servant a lasting dynasty. Do you deal with everyone this way, O sovereign Lord? What more can I say to you? You know what your servant is really like, sovereign Lord. Can you say that honestly in your prayers? God, you know exactly what I'm like. All those hidden parts of me. And then beyond that, he says, because of your promise and according to your will, you have done all these great things and have made them known to your servant. How great you are, O sovereign Lord. There is no one like you. We have never even heard of another God like you. What other nations on earth is like your people, Israel? What other nation, O God, have you redeemed from slavery to be your own people? You made a great name for yourself when you redeemed your people from Egypt. You performed awesome miracles and drove out the nations and gods that stood in their way. You made Israel your own people forever, and you, O Lord, became their God. Todd, you can come up right now. What we could see from David's response inside of 2 Samuel 7 is he acknowledges that his deeds are not going to earn him a place in life. His affection and his allegiance and his servitude towards God, when he acknowledges him as king, he sees and witnesses what God does through his promises and how he provides for him. Today, we see the ultimate king that comes after David, that is promised through David, through Jesus. So again, my big idea is this. Just Jesus, more of him and less of everything else. With the bottom line stressing whoever and whatever you serve will dictate the trajectory of your life. You have to ask, what do you serve? Who do you serve? And if it's not something else, it's going to come back to yourself. And when you fail, what do you do? Where do you go? The two questions, again, must be asked. Who do you serve? And if you know who you serve and don't want to serve that one who is lasting or feel like you can't, ask yourself, why not? What stops you? If anything else other than God, if it's anything else other than God, you have to identify it now. Do not be like Abner, who waited towards the end when he knew the truth and wanted to do his own thing, or Joab, who twisted things and tried to live as much as he can in the truth while maintaining his own affections. In this idea of waiting for some mythical day to come when you figure it all out and you turn towards that surrender. Don't wait. The day will come when everything will catch up to you. It caught up to Abner. It caught up to Joab. It will catch up to you too. You must know who you are serving. So my challenge to you is take a little seat by yourself sometime. Find a chair. Ask yourself before your king or kings if you have to literally put a bottle of booze in front of you, if you have to put a literal cell phone in front of you, if you have to put whatever you feel is most important or most impactful in your life in front of you, sit in front of it and ask it, who am I before you? Do I believe you are powerful to lead and to save me? Is it going to last? And if it's anything other than God, I guarantee you it's not going to last. You're sitting before God and asking these questions. I encourage you to pray this prayer. Help me to submit to you. Help me to submit to your reign, Jesus Christ. Let me stop being king. If the king is anything other than God, pray that God may make the former kings lesser and God greater. These are challenges for us every day because, again, everything will fight for your affection. The challenge to serve God alone, if it's anything else, it will kill you. Sin will destroy you. God alone will save you. He is drawing you to himself. As you hear the good news of the gospel, you are left with the responsibility to do something about it now. Make a decision. Our gentle king is calling you to take action and abandon the pretend kings and draw near to him, to abide in him, and you will be made whole. You will experience God's shalom. Join us for